Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to do something a little bit different as there's been a lot of data mining. I feel that needs a bit of a rest and this is something I've been wanting to do since I got my hands on Warhammer 3. So I figured a Warhammer tier list focusing around all the different playable factions, there are 12 in total, with some of them split in between the same race, would be kind of fun as they all play kind of differently and so on, and I have almost 400 hours into the game already. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in, and we'll start off with the demonic factions first. So let's start off with the Exiles of Khorne led by Skarbrand. So it comes to the whole thing with monogod demons. Everything was kind of surprising even for myself as I didn't know how they were going to go about it. A faction like Khorne with no magic and very limited range, that in the form of artillery, which is pretty much better as a melee unit, I was kind of worried that it wasn't really going to be competitive or fun whatsoever. I just want to say right now that this is mostly going to focus around playstyle, fun-wise, and so on. Interestingly enough, however, as I managed to get the game early access and start playing, Khorne ended up being one of my favorite factions. Yeah, even I'm surprised, considering the fact that it's very fast-paced, you're getting into fights constantly, especially as you defeat other enemies, raise other settlements, and so on. I was really surprised with how fast-paced the campaign was and how enjoyable it ended up being. You're not really building up a empire in the most normal sense because you'll just get those settlements anyway as you start spreading corruption. My only real complaint regarding Khorne's campaign is the fact that, really, you want to start moving towards mortal units more than demons if you're going for a basic kind of fluffy army, because, well, Warriors of Chaos and even the Juggernauts, they're better with the Mortal Riders. But that's, well, the fact that there's not that many demon options when it comes to Khorne. There's probably less with Khorne than there is with any others. However, it was very fun, and all that really makes me think is how this could be improved through DLC and all that. But with that being said, in its pure vanilla state, I'm going to have to put him in S tier. Out of all the monogod factions that are currently in game, Khorne is probably the one in the best standing. Sure, there's stuff with Zinc that we'll go in just a second, but I think that Khorne's probably the best out of all the Chaos factions at the moment. Next, we're going to go to the Oracles of Tzeentch, led by Kairos Fateweaver, a very interesting faction as it's very reminiscent of that in the tabletop. You see the Warriors of Chaos on the tabletop that followed Tzeentch would have a ward save and so on, that's kind of represented with the barrier, so you're kind of tanky. It's not the best, but you are kind of tanky. However, most of your roster is that of demon units which have a lot of firepower and range, and it's actually kind of ridiculous. You are the most range-heavy faction, and I mean ridiculous in a very good way. It was quite nice to see it with more laws of magic, as obviously you have access to 3 different laws of magic, and the good thing is that you have a lot of different variety with flamers and horrors and so on, so you can build up quite a varied army. It doesn't all have to be doom stacks if you don't want to. My only real issue is lack of tank. While you do have the barrier and you do have stuff like the Forsaken and the Chaos Spawn, it would have been nice if we would have had some Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch just to be able to be your proper front line. This is something which was very popular on the tabletop. Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch were always really popular. The thing is, I know the community didn't want reskins or recolors or whatever. I think that it would have been nice to at least have them if they didn't have enough time. A recolor is easy enough to do because, you know, it's just change the tint of something and then change it down the line in a rework. However, I do get that people were just kind of pissed off about it because we had the Knights and so on, and the Knights are really, really cool, but I wouldn't call them a frontline unit. It would have just been nice to have some footmen too. That being said, something that made me really excited about Tzeentch was the inclusion of Doom Knights. Now, yes, Doom Knights are technically a recolor because it's a Chaos Warrior just mounted on a disc, but this is a new unit. This is completely new for Total War Warhammer 3. We never had those in the tabletop, and that makes me hope that Creative Assembly and Games Workshop have come into an agreement that we might see some new stuff in the future. Mechanically, Tzeentch is just really, really fun. Kairos has the changing of the ways and so on, and you can just do a lot of weird stuff with it. You can play around, you can pretty much become the puppet master of the map. And, you know, that's really cool and it's very, very Tzeentchian. I think that it's been done very, very well. In regards to ranking, I'd have to put this in A tier. There's a bit more that could be improved, but it's in a very, very, very good place. Like I said, just some basic front line and you're golden. Yeah, you can get that with blue horrors and so on, but they're squishy. Anything that's Tzeentchian demon is pretty squishy. So, Chaos Warriors, literally that's all it needs, at least in my opinion, and the faction's pretty much golden. Next, we're going to look at the Pox Makers of Nurgle, led by Kor'gath Plaguefather. So, this one's going to be kind of interesting. Obviously, in terms of style and so on, it's probably the most unique faction. No, it is the most unique faction in terms of recruitment when it comes to the Warhammer series at the very least. But it is dreadfully slow. Now, that's perfectly fine because it kind of fits with the theme, and the recruitment can be in your favor if your campaign has been going well at the very least. But it's very easy for it to go south just by losing an army, getting ambushed, and so on. It's kind of brutal. Looking at it from a mechanic perspective, it's great. It's probably one of the most interesting for me, and it's got something for a real plague-like feel. However, the units themselves are dreadfully slow. Keep in mind that, yes, this is part of the lore that should be like that anyway. But there is a bit of lack there. A few more faster units would have been nice. Some Chaos Knights of Nurgle would have been cool. I mean, that was something that was kind of there in the Tamukhan book, which we know this roster does get stuff from. So Rot Knights would have been interesting, or even just recolored Chaos Knights would have been kind of cool, just to have a bit of a lance to, you know, do the whole hammer and anvil type of thing. You've got the anvil, you've got a lot of anvils, but you don't really have a lot of hammers. Even the Rotflies themselves aren't real good hammers. The Plague mechanic is super cool, and I just hope that something of that line goes to Clan Pestilence in the future, because it's just that interesting, and I really do enjoy it. It's just because recruitment is so slow, one simple mistake can pretty much just cost you your whole campaign. It's something that I've already said, but it's happened to me, so it's like, yeah, the wound is fresh. The slow pace of a campaign for Nurgle stuff does make sense from a lore perspective, but from a gameplay perspective, it could be a little faster. Hopefully they'll fine-tune at least the cycles to make it a little quicker, because, yeah, you can get it a little faster when it comes to some technology and so on, but it still feels a bit slow. If you want to get really strong, you need to expand a lot, and with this campaign specifically, with the whole Demon Souls and so on, you don't want to expand anyway, because that means more portals to deal with, and yeah, it becomes a bit of a sludge. Ranking-wise, I'm going to have to put him on B, which is unfortunate, because I actually really enjoy Nurgle's faction, but if he had access to a few faster mortals like Chaos Knights of Nurgle, or even Rot Knights if they ever get an official model, that would be kind of cool, and it would make them a lot more user-friendly. And obviously, since they're not spawned in like demons, they should at least be recruited in the normal way at least. I don't know, but it would just be nice to have a hammer for your anvil, and something that doesn't move as slow as that random person with loads of coupons in front of you in the supermarket. Next, the Seducers of Slaanesh, led by the Keeper of Secrets, Nekari. So, for context, I have been waiting for a Slaaneshi faction, a proper Slaaneshi faction, for 5 years. Slaanesh units are my favourite, Slaanesh is my favourite Chaos God, and it's a faction that I played very competitively on the tabletop. Slaaneshi Demons, we didn't really have mixed roster units until, well, pretty much the end of 8th edition. Now, it's everything I hoped it to be, because the playstyle is supposed to be like that. You want to work around a lot of squishy units, a lot of armor piercing, and a lot of really fast stuff. So yeah, everything's done well, it's done lore friendly, and it's just done how it was kind of expected. It's a lot of micromanagement, which a lot of people don't like, but I'm a big fan of. So yeah, I know it's not for everyone. But as much as I sing the praises of Slaanesh, there are a few negatives. Well, first off, you know, the chariots aren't working. Yeah, they're just not doing damage as they're supposed to, and it's a bit of a shame considering this is a chariot/cavalry heavy faction. Hopefully, when they eventually do this hotfix, they will also fix the Slaaneshi stuff, or else I might just cry. I've already played Slaanesh all the way through Legendary mode, and I would love to play again, because, well, replayability is a good thing in Total War, but not without working chariots, because, yeah, that was sad. In terms of the future, they could require a few more things, like some Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh would be very helpful as your frontline is Marauders, and yeah, the Marauders look amazing, I'm really happy about that, but they are very weak and will basically get slapped away with no issues. I mean, they're into the slapping and so on, but you know what I mean. A few armored troops would be nice. Again, it's the whole hammer and anvil thing, and I don't think everyone needs that, but it would just be nice to have a troop choice which will allow you to get on walls and so on, because you don't want to be having marauders by the end of your campaign. You obviously can't stick the chariots or your cavalry up there, so defending settlements can be a bit of an issue, especially since, yes, I know you're supposed to move around the settlement, but a lot of them have, well, very tight corridors. You can't really get around to do damage, can you? Sieges are pretty much a nightmare when it comes to Slaanesh. You can work around that with a lot of heavy magic and so on, but yeah, you guys have been playing for a while now, you know what I mean. For that, and it does pain me to do this, I'm going to have to put the Seducers of Slaanesh on B tier. There's still a lot of stuff that's really fun about the faction, but without working chariots, at the very least, it's pretty lacking, and you will find yourself pretty much, missing 3 different units, because there's the Hellflayers, there's the Seeker Chariots and Exalted Seeker Chariots. While the Exalted Seeker Chariots themselves are decent, you're still missing out on 2 other units. Even then, the Exalted one could be a bit better. Whilst we're here, if anyone from CA is listening, please fix the faction. Like, Games Workshop already screwed up Slaanesh for a lot of different editions and then forgot about her and almost deleted her. Don't forget about the faction in Total War Warhammer, please. Please. And finally, for the Chaos factions, we have the Legions of Chaos, led by, well, nameless Daniel, as they've been calling him. Yuri, if you want to go with that. It's just, yeah. This is by far one of the largest factions in the whole Total War Warhammer series, mainly because he gets access to 4 different factions that of all the mono gods just scrunched together. You get some of the mechanics, but not all of them, so you're a jack of all trades, master of none. However, there's so much different stuff that you could do. Building a demon is really, really fun because, well, you know, you're able to just tailor your character to how you want it to be in one of the most interesting ways that Total War's ever presented something like this, and you can choose to either go full Undivided, full Slaanesh, full Khorne, full Nurgle, full Zinc. It's up to you. It's one of the more roleplay aspects, and yeah, it's absolutely fun. The big issue at the moment is that, you know, you don't really get all the mechanics. You don't get a technology tree, which means that you can't really improve your units that much. So you do end up in the weaker side of things. And yeah, I know a lot of people do like this faction, but it kind of becomes kind of obvious in later game when everyone's already had the tech buffs or the skill tree buffs and so on. You do get skill tree buffs and you're able to pretty much get every greater demon and so on. So that stuff is really, really cool. But without the technology bonuses, it's kind of noticeable. Now, you do get bonuses for your troops by getting more and more glory, but even then it does feel like it's not really enough. Like I said, jack of all trades, master of none. It does get to the point that even the Undivided Demon Prince, your Chaos Legendary Lord, is kind of weak when compared to Exalted Greater Demons, because he's not really built to be a full spellcaster or a full damage dealer. He's very much in the lower tier spectrum, and yeah, he could be a bit stronger. Now, you do get access to some really cool stuff, because everything will be able to teleport, make use of bloodletting, but the bloodletting stuff does also have its negatives too, so it's a bit of a strange way for this character. Having access to such a large roster is awesome, but you can't really mix and match as you please because, well, it's better to put Khornate units with a Khornate Herald or Zinchian units with a Zinch Herald. It would be nice if there was proper Undivided stuff, because that way you'd get a proper Chaos Undivided feel. Now, the faction is very fun. It's probably not that strong. For that, I'm going to have to put it in B tier. I imagine that it would get a little strong in the future, but just mixing up the skill points would just be a massive change and make it a lot more fun. So you'd be more incentivized to mix and match your rosters and actually have kind of varied armies, because that's what the whole Legions of Chaos, well, Demons of Chaos army book was about, and it just kind of makes sense. Right, we're going to start going on to Grand Cafe, and first up we're going to talk about the Iron Dragon of the Western Provinces, Zhao Ming. A very interesting character, as he's pretty much a dude. Lore-wise, he chills with his warriors and he may or may not be addicted to warpstones, so yeah, you know, that's kind of fun. Now, Grand Cafe itself is one of the newer factions in the Warhammer franchise because it was never really established, so we're seeing it here for the first time in Total War Warhammer 3, and Zhao Ming is a rather interesting campaign, very much focusing on being friends with the ogres if you so wish, using a lot of caravan mechanics because you get a lot more benefit from that, and, you know, just expanding into Cafe or just going into the Mountains of Moor if you so wish. You've got a lot of options here. Eventually, you will need to take over all of Grand Cafe as your ally and sister Miao Ying ends up dying out sometimes, but in most cases, you can just expand as you wish and you'll have a lot more varied enemies to fight than your sister. Variety is very important, so you've got Skaven, you've got Greenskins, you've got Chaos, you've got Ogres, so yeah, you're going to be able to fight a lot and you won't have to fight with the other Cafaean factions, but you can if you so wish. He's definitely got his own thing going, so you don't even have to worry too much about the whole Great Bastion thing. That's more for the sister stuff, and it's pretty enjoyable, I must say. I've preferred him over his sister for sure. I know it's a lot to ask because he's a base game legendary lord and they generally don't have different mechanics from others from the same faction, but it would be nice if he would have had some other mechanics to make him more unique. As you still have the Great Bastion stuff, and you're kind of far away, the AI is always really stupid because, you know, this is Total War, so yeah. For that, I'm going to have to put him in possibly B tier once again. If they could just add something to give him a bit more flavor, that would have been perfect, but even then, Cafe is nice, and I must say, yes, the whole yin and yang thing is kind of exhausting, since you basically have to do mathematics just to keep the whole harmony aspect keeping as balanced as possible, but it's not too bad. His sister, on the other hand, has the more annoying campaign, I must say, because you've got the unique Cafean campaign where you're defending the Great Bastion, but you've also got to do the base game stuff, which kind of makes you babysit two different things. You have to take Miao Ying into the portals to deal with, well, getting all the demon souls and so on, but at the same time, enemies are coming from, well, the Chaos Wastes, and you've got to basically defend the wall. Sometimes you won't have money, because if you're playing in harder difficulties, that's how it is. It's very easy to tear up the Bastion itself, and you can get a lot of good benefits from it, especially since you can recruit a lot of high-tier units very early on, but, you know, I don't want to do two things that I basically have to babysit. Again, this would have been a lot better for Grand Cafe, and they would have ranked higher in my lists if we just didn't have the whole Realm of Chaos campaign stuff, because defending the Great Bastion and all that is cool, it's very thematic, we know in war that's a very common thing where you'll get loads of Chaos incursions, but with Kairos right next to you, and obviously with all the Chaos armies, the rogue armies and all that spawning and getting stronger and just attacking you all the time, you can't expand as quickly as you can with pretty much every other faction. I think even Nurgle has an easier way to expand, because you're just dealing with protecting the gates, you're dealing with the demon souls, you're dealing with all the other enemies inside Cafe, all the enemies outside Cafe trying to get in, you're babysitting a lot of stuff. It gets a bit hectic, and then you've got to deal with, obviously, the whole mathematics involved with everything with harmony. It's a lot to kind of throw to new players. I myself am a veteran at this point, and I was like, well, this is a bit tedious. So I'm going to have to put Miao Ying into C tier, which is unfortunate because she's cool. She's an interesting character, she's got great spells and so on, and yeah, it's just, I don't want to do too many things at the same time because, you know, this is Total War, and I don't want to just sit here doing mathematics whilst also defending the gates, whilst also getting rid of the demon souls, whilst also closing any random portals. It's a tad much in my opinion. Cafe as a faction is fun, there's loads of really cool stuff about it, but the mechanics involved for the Legendary Lords is a bit much. Now we can start moving on to the Kislevite factions, and the first one being the Ice Court led by the Tsarina Katerin. Kislev has a bit of an issue where they have two different stories. Not only are they dealing with the whole Demon Souls thing, but they're also dealing with trying to unite Kislev as a whole, which is its own separate mechanic. It can be a bit daunting on people because it's a lot of extra stuff. That being said, Katerin has the best start of all the Kislevite factions as she starts with a major city, and because her campaign is designed in such a way, she will be able to get a second Kislevite major city really quickly, which means that you'll be able to expand quite fast, get all the big units and all the best units really fast. While her campaign is definitely not the easiest, and I don't know why it's recommended to be a first playthrough, it is definitely one of the most fun, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was done very well. If you didn't have to deal with two of the different campaign things, you know, getting the Demon Souls and also competing for dominance throughout Kislev, then it would have probably been a bit better. It'll be a lot more fun in the Immortal Empires when the Demon Souls aren't there, because usually that's just sandbox. But with that being said, I will have to say that I'm going to have to give her an A, because I really enjoyed the Kislevite campaign. Katerin's is the best. There's some issues with the other ones, which we'll talk about in just a bit, but yeah, Katerin, if you want a fun, thematic, but also easier, in a sense, campaign, you'd definitely want to play as Katerin. This is also the case because Kislev is really fun because a lot of the stuff is pretty much a hybrid unit. You've got a lot of gunpowder, you've got a lot of range, you've got a lot of heavy hitting stuff, which is also your range unit. So you are going to be dealing with, well, Chaos factions, but not to have too much of an issue, really. Moving on to Kosteltin's faction of the Great Orthodoxy, well, things are a little bit different. You see, the faction's kind of focused on trash tier units, and you're pretty much supposed to play with loads of trash tier armies. the faction is pretty weak because you start in a point of Kislev which is bordering Norska, which earlier on I would have said, yeah, you know, it's Norska, it's not too much of an issue, but you do have some hyper-aggressive factions like, say for example, the Demon Prince, and if Skarbrand decides to come down because, you know, player bias and so on, you've got to deal with that too. It's a different campaign. I'd say that Katerin's is better, mainly because you can explore better units. Kolstatin's faction is cool, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's probably one of the worst. It puts you in a kind of bad situation. It's also the case that, yes, he's a decent fighter and all that, but I mean, come on, he's not a spellcaster or anything, he's a warrior priest, he's got some interesting stuff, it's cool and all that, but he's kind of weak. I don't feel too much of a reason to play as him, especially if I've got Katerin or Boris, and I feel like he could do with a little bit more. Maybe if the Orthodoxy had some specific troops for them, which would be then made a bit more better rather than just trash tier Corsairs and so on, then yeah, you know? For that, I'm going to have to put his faction on D tier. I love the concept, it's a great concept, but it could be better and it could be done in just a more fun way. He's cool because he just basically won't die, you can bring him back really early on if you get some skills, but yeah, we already have Morgur, and Morgur is much cooler. For the last Kislevite Legendary Lord, we have Boris Ursus. A big surprise, well, to ourselves, the creators, when we were told in advance, not to you guys because it was leaked constantly, but a surprise nonetheless, and he's a pretty cool character. He's got a very different start position as he doesn't focus on the whole Kislevite on-doings with between the Ice Court and the Great Orthodoxy, but instead you find yourselves in the borders of the Darklands, fighting against Orcs, Skaven, Chaos, pretty much anything that's in that region. The campaign is pretty fun because it's so drastically different. You do have a few clutches, as obviously you don't have the main Kislevite cities, which are so good, but it's very entertaining nonetheless, and I imagine the campaign will get a lot more fun or a lot more hectic with the eventual release of the Chaos Dwarves, as that means that you'll be fighting against something that we're all expecting to be fairly powerful and kind of broken. But even then, Boris presents such a nice and unique campaign, even though you do have to go a little bit out of the way to unlock it. You'll have to play as Katerin or Kolstatin first, take over all of Kislev. I feel like it's a great thing, especially as a surprise 10th Legendary Lord. For that, I'm actually going to give him an A rating because I've been having a lot of fun with Boris. I think that it's just so different and it provides so many different types of enemies. You get to fight so much more variety and not having to deal with the Kislevite stuff with the whole dominance thing. I mean, you can take part in it, but you're actively helping out the other factions rather than you working against them. And just focusing on the Demon Soul stuff, which eventually will go away. Boris will then need some sort of unique mechanic, I'd say, but other than that, I think he's pretty good. Now we can move on to the Ogres, which have 2 Legendary Lords. These are the pre-order incentives, so if you haven't bought the game within the first week post-launch, then you'll have to buy them as a DLC, but they're a pretty fun faction. It's not full, like they don't have their complete roster. I'm imagining that that's DLC for the future, but the Ogres themselves do have an interesting faction, mainly because they can take over quite a lot of territory quite quickly. There's a bit of a clutch with food and so on, and yeah, sometimes your units aren't the best because they will get hit by anti-large stuff and you'll feel it, but you have a lot of variety when it comes to heavy-hitting troops, versatile troops, and even just really powerful artillery. The first faction is that of the Goldtooth tribe, led by Greasus Goldtooth, the de facto leader of the Ogre Kingdoms. So you start in the Mountains of Mourn, which is a lore-friendly start position. You're basically fighting against other Ogre tribes, but you do have a lot of enemies around you. I'm talking Skaven, Orcs in the Darklands, eventually Chaos Dwarves, Cathay, North is Chaos. You've got so much that you've got a bit of a varied campaign. Again, you're still going with the whole same campaign narrative and so on, which I feel for the Ogres should probably have been a bit different, but you don't really have any other things. You can just move around, establish kingdoms, build up camps where you want them. They're quite easy to build up, and you'll just be able to, well, follow the Ogres in a lore-friendly way. Greasus has the best start position because it's the safest, that's for sure, because, well, other Ogre tribes are generally going to be quite friendly with you, unless, you know, you decide to just destroy them all and take over as the Over-Tyrant, which you should definitely do, by the way. The only thing I would say is Greasus does deserve some mechanics to specialize around confederating all the other Ogre tribes, because, you know, it's Greasus and that's literally what he does in the lore. But other than that, I'd say that he deserves an A slot. He's just very, very enjoyable. It's an area where you pretty much expected to play that way, and I think that the Ogres are in a very good place despite missing a few things that will likely be added in as a DLC. And lastly, we have the Disciples of the Moor, led by Skrog the Slaughterer, a really interesting faction, mainly because he begins in the Grey Mountains, so you're really far away from other ogre tribes. You have no allies, you're left alone, and you're fighting with the Empire, Marienburg, Wood Elves, pretty much anything in that region, which does make it really enjoyable. I must say at the very beginning I was concerned because, well, no other ogre tribes, you've pretty much, well, you're alone, which doesn't always seem as fun. However, it worked out for Skrog, mainly because the ogres are in such a good place right now, and obviously the Empire doesn't have access to all its stuff, it doesn't have access to the other legendary lords, and I don't think even the Empire is prepared for a Lead Belcher Doomstack. It's just pretty disgusting. So with that, I'm going to have to give him a B, mainly because I would say it would be nice if there was some other stuff, like for example, some other units which kind of theme with the bestial style of Skrog's playthrough. You know, Yetis and so on, but it's how it works, and keep in mind that my ranking is below in the pinned comment with how S, A, B, C, and D work for me. Like, the faction itself is very, very fun, and it presents a different style of gameplay. I think that there's so much towards these factions, and very little of them I'm talking negatively about. The ones that I am talking slightly negative about, they're gonna get some fixes in the future, hopefully in terms of hotfixes and patches and so on, which will then fix up their campaign a little bit more. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about the rankings and how you would personally rank all these different factions. And let's start a bit of a discussion. This is always fun. It will always be good to have little discussions about the state of the game at the moment, as obviously Creative Assembly are looking at how they can improve, especially with how the launch went. So yeah, let's hope for the very best, and let's hopefully point them in the right direction. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games, where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.